I'll just say no.
All right.
I think we're live. Let me see.
It says it's streaming live on YouTube.
Okay.
My end.
Yeah, we are live. Hey, Alice. Welcome to Book Club. You remember John from Resistance House Band. We have joining us again. Thanks for being here, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Alice, as you know, we are discussing the Phantom Tollbooth tonight. Very much in the vein of your adventure, Alice. I have a lot to say about this book. I guess the first thing I want to talk about is have you ever heard of chiastic literature, John?
No, I haven't.
So it's an ancient type of Jewish storytelling. It's what the Torah is, like the Old Testament.
Okay.
It's this basically like the rabbis that wrote that stuff had a method of storytelling that was kind of like it was like they had a specific way of doing it, I guess. Like basically you're either doing it right or you're not. It wasn't like there's like a formula. That's what I'm trying to say. There was a formula to it. And they believed, to varying degrees, like in mysticism around this kind of storytelling. And basically, I'm not an expert by any means, but to kind of like just kind of summarize it, the stories would start where they end. They're always circular. And there would be certain elements also, like other things had to be true about it as well. But that was like a really big part of it. And sorry, Alice, I'm putting links up so you can see us talking. But it was a specific style of storytelling, and it started where it ended, and it was all allegorical. So what's interesting about that is as we move on into the future, Lewis Carroll was an Oxford theologian. He understood this very, very well. He understood the type of storytelling I'm laying out here. And Alice in Wonderland follows this formula. Now, a lot of other books, like The Phantom Tollbooth, I've noticed, follow this kind of layout. And what I find so fascinating about that is if we take it back to the ancient style of storytelling, this is supposed to be like a mystical thing, and what it has to do is it's all archetypal or archetypical. Yeah, where like Alice in Wonderland is a story about you. It's a story about me. Jesus Christ is a story about me. It's a story about everyone who reads it. So is the Phantom Tollbooth. It does such a good job of putting you there. Like, it's a coming of age story, very much so. Like, hey, how's it going?
Hey. Good. How are y'all?
Doing good. Well. This is John Sims Jones from Resistance House Band. I don't know if you guys
know. We've played together before. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. I knew that. I was at that show.
There's a lot of shows going on.
Yeah. Thanks for coming, guys.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
I'm still putting links up to everything, but we were just talking about that the type of book that the Phantom Tollbooth is in the same vein as Alice in Wonderland, as The Alchemist, as I guess I would really say a lot of ancient Hebrew stories, but also the new, like the Gospels as well. I'd put all of those in the same vein. I would actually make a distinction. I'm interested to know what you guys think about this. I would make a distinction between like I'm not even really sure what to call it, but like Alice in Wonderland and like the Phantom Tollbooth are more akin to like Odysseys, like Dante's Inferno or Homer's Odyssey or like the Iliad or something, than they are to like The Hobbit or like Harry Potter. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely the quest element.
Yeah, the heroes.
And
I mean, I know, you know, because this is part of the fifth grade curriculum that like Metro Nashville schools is using these days, and like, I mean, not that this is like, I mean, the way they teach it is not necessarily like, I mean, it kind of scratches the surface of a lot of things, but like one of the things that they do focus on a lot is like teaching hero's journey and kind of like pacing to stories in the context of that book. And like, I mean, I think it is a really good kind of example of that, especially of just like how much like Milo's growth and like the lessons that he accumulates as he goes along like play a really integral part into how he deals with things like as the book progresses. Like everything that happens along the way is extremely intentional for the payoff later of like how he's better equipped to deal with that kind of stuff, which I really appreciate a lot. There's for having so many distinct kind of like episodic kind of moments in the book, it's interesting seeing like how little that is like really wasted space or anything. Like it is all like cumulative throughout the book.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, the things you don't think are that important, it all comes back around, and there's a reason for it. Everything is it's like a near perfect work. Everything in it fits so well. You couldn't add or take away anything from something like this. Do you guys have favorite characters?
That's what I was just gonna ask.
I read your mind. Okay, you go first then.
I liked Officer Shrift. I thought he was hilarious. Yeah. And also the humbug, of course.
Yeah. The officer reminds me so much of I guess like just any like dopey police officer in like a British comedy from like that era, you know?
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah, when I first started reading this, I was like, I feel like this is a British novel. And Hyde had to correct me that it was not. But it feels like a British novel.
I thought it was a British novel, like, because I read this as a kid. And I recently looked up or just read about the author, because that's not something that, you know, you do as much as a child. But no, he's from the US.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I don't know why I also assumed that this book was British. Just
there's something about the tone that's very much like that. Kind of and also that sort of like absurdist element. I feel like you see that in a lot of British.
Norton also seems like a British name.
Yeah, that's fair.
What's up, Viki?
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I read this as a kid, so I'm gonna try and go off of memory.
No worries. It's like I actually just found out that there's like a 80s or 70s movie. Have you guys seen this?
Wait,
what? Seen clips of it. It's yeah, because I mean, so for context, you know, like I was a teacher you know, for this past year, and so like I, you know, did teach this with students, and yeah, I dug up a bunch of clips from it just to try to, you know, put some variation in it. It is very like, it doesn't, I think because like there are so many like sketches in the book, it's hard to like accept what you're seeing on the screen as like the correct adaptation, because it doesn't look like what's in the book.
Gotcha.
But it is still kind of neat just seeing what they did with it. Like I've shown the Doldrums clip a lot, and that is kind of fun, like watching the Lethargians like just meld into the background and stuff. It is very just kind of like trippy sort of visuals on it.
When you're teaching this book, what are, I guess, what's one of your favorite things to point out to kids?
I mean, so, you know, I only taught it the 1 year, and now I work for the Department of Education. I don't get to do that this year. They're probably doing that right now. But like some of the things that stood out to me on it, the first part where the book gets interesting for students, I think, is the weatherman, which I mean is very early in the book, but like just like the way he talks is like very fun to read out loud with just like his rapid fire kind of sort of syntax that he uses. So like that's like the first time I was able to convince the students like, no, really, this is going to be funny sometimes. Like, and so they really like that. They like talk a lot. I got one kid to appreciate what I think is the funniest part, which is the awful din, just laughing at just like all those like weird jokes that he makes. I love that part, and like I had like 1 out of the 40 kids that I taught like also think that was funny. And the trivium is like every kid's favorite part. Which I mean I agree with. That's like also one of my favorite parts of it. I think they just really like how creepy he is.
You mean Slender Man?
Yeah, I mean that, and yeah, that's what. Yeah,
that was nuts. I'd forgotten that illustration from back in the day, and I saw it again, and then immediately brought back.
It's creepy.
Just
Slender. I'm really glad you brought up the trivium, because when I got to this part, I saw the picture and I'm like, oh, it's Slender Man. Then I read the part that describes him. Just ahead, leaning comfortably against a dead tree, stood a very elegant-looking gentleman. He was beautifully dressed in a dark suit with a well-pressed shirt and tie. His shoes were polished, his nails were clean, his hat was well brushed, and a white handkerchief adorned his breast pocket. But his expression was somewhat blank. In fact, it was completely blank, for he had neither eyes, nose, or mouth. And I'm like, yeah, this is exactly whoever made the cryptid Slender Man like based this off of. Absolutely.
Yeah. So one thing that I really love about that part that I didn't realize until teaching it, because I mean, for anybody, like, I don't think I said that this is my favorite book, and I've read it like probably about 9 times at this point. Like, one of the things I really like about it is that every time I go back to it, like I feel like I catch something that like I completely missed on previous reads that like seems super intentional. It's just also like delivered subtly enough that you wouldn't necessarily be aware that you're missing anything. And that character in particular, like I found as an adult that for all the lessons about like, you know, how learning can be great and everything, there's also a lot of stuff that's very critical of the working world when you read it through that lens. And that character in particular, I really like that because last year when I was teaching, there was some day where like during a profession or like during a planning period, like I had to fill out forms for every kid I taught. And I taught English as a second language, and the forms were about like whether they were going to move up to like a new tier in like a literacy like intervention class. And like it was already a guarantee that even if they were making huge progress, they were not going to move out of my class. They were brand new to the country learning English for the first time. And I had to handwrite like and fill out these like 40 forms that, you know, took like an hour. And, you know, there's no reason for it. It was a complete waste of time. I could have been doing something better, but I wasn't mad at my administration for it because I knew it wasn't their idea. And I realized like, that's kind of how that works, right? When you have trivium work, you know, the pointless stuff that doesn't contribute to anything, a lot of times you don't know who made you do that. You literally could not put a face to the person who's responsible for that.
Oh, that's interesting.
And,
wow.
And that's exactly the trivium. He has no face at all, but he's dressed super nice because you know it's somebody above your pay grade.
Yeah, the faceless bureaucracy.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, and I mean, like, you know, I mean, like, it took me my 9th reading to appreciate that, but I'm confident that that has to be what he intended for that. Like, I mean,
no, that makes complete sense to me because he's dressed. He's like he's in charge.
Right.
And you like wouldn't get that as a kid, you know?
No.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about works like this is like it's not like you can't appreciate it as a kid. Like it's still like a kid can engage with it, but then like you said, John, like you could read it like 9 times and keep finding stuff 100 times even.
Yeah, and I think especially like one of the things I'm really excited about as far as like rereading it is concerned is just that like what I've personally found. Sorry, my cat's being awful. He's not supposed to be in here at all. But but like what I found is that like as you get to different stages in life, like the things that stand out in the book start to really shift on you of like that it's just it's so layered and like what it's trying to communicate to different audiences that like I don't want to be one of those people who's like, oh, when I'm old, I'm gonna think this way because nobody can actually predict that. But I will be really curious to know like, if I have kids, like will the book read differently at that point? And what kinds of stuff will stand out then?
Yeah.
Because I definitely wasn't gonna get some of the things that I did until like I just started working full time and just, had those experiences.
Something I was confused about. The Math Magician and King Azaz both tell Milo, there's something we need to tell you, but we can't tell you till you get back. They don't, and then when he gets back, I don't think they ever actually say what it is, or did I miss that?
They
do.
They did. They said that the tasks were impossible.
Oh. Wow. Wow. Interesting. Yeah, I missed that for sure. Because I read over that part like twice and I guess something about that just wasn't clicking with me. That's cool. I like at the end too. He's talking to Rhyme and she says, they're shouting for you. And Milo says, but I could never have done it without everyone's help. And Reason says, that may be true, but you had the courage to try. And what you can do is often simply a matter of what you will do. And that one really got me. I love that part. It's has anyone read The Alchemist?
I haven't.
So there's a character in The Alchemist where this boy is basically trying to decide. He had a dream about pyramids and it made him want to go to the desert, but he was a shepherd in Spain somewhere. So it's a big deal for him to uproot his life and go to the desert. So he's at a point in his life where he meets a merchant's daughter, and he's shearing his sheep for her father. And basically he develops a relationship with this girl, and he's thinking about settling down. And this old man comes to him and he tells him, I'm Melchizedek. I'm the king of Salem. And he opens up his shirt and he has a golden breastplate on with Urim and Thummim. But he tells him, he's like, I show up in every hero's journey. Sometimes I'm a good idea. He's like, one time I showed up to an emerald miner. He had been mining emeralds for 10 years and with no success. And he was just about to give up, but I appeared as a rock and rolled up to his foot. And he picked me up and threw me out of anger against the cliff face, and it revealed a giant emerald. And he's like, that's me. I'm the final push when you're about to give up. And when I got to Expectations in the Phantom Tollbooth, and the weatherman shows up, and he's like, everyone goes through Expectations. Not everyone leaves here, though. I am here to make sure that you keep going. I'm like, this can't be a coincidence. This is something that's I don't mean to go on too much of a tangent, but I was watching a video where this guy was talking about Super Mario, and he was like, yeah, Super Mario is not deep, right? You're just going to save the princess from the reptile brain, and access the divine feminine. And you can take cheat codes, you can take warp pipes to go to further levels, but when you get there, you're not prepared for it because you didn't take the steps correctly. And he's like, how do I know this? And like, he's like, here's the thing, Mario isn't as deep as I'm saying it is, but every story is this. Every story is the same story. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think as people, we really only know how to tell one story in a myriad of ways. I don't remember where I was going with that, but I just see so many similarities with, especially these kind of stories, Alice in Wonderland, Phantom Tollbooth, that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Yeah.
Oh, Star Wars and
yeah. Star Wars is another great example of the hero. Actually, yeah, episode 4 itself is alone is very much, you have the that's what I've always liked about George Lucas is like episode 4 is about a knight with a sword going to save the princess from an evil wizard, and it's not a sci-fi story, it's a fantasy story in a sci-fi setting. And if you look at his other works like Willow, it's like it makes sense, and I've always loved that about George Lucas. Yeah, but it is very, I love that you pointed that out. It is a very, Luke's story is the hero's story. Yeah. I think my favorite character, what was the guy at Conclusions? Well, maybe not my favorite character. That might be my favorite part.
Can be.
Yeah, it can be. He's as scared as can be. Yeah. There's so much. I feel like Norton Juster did the wordplay stuff actually more than Alice in Wonderland. Like he leaned into that more than Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, most of the characters are based off of wordplay. That was actually one of the assignment, or really like multiple assignments that we did last year. Was like students having to like pick like common like sayings in English and like write their own chapter of the Phantom Tollbooth where they meet a character. So like, they could like, have them like meet the early bird and like, have it be like a super punctual, like literal bird, just like come up with examples like that. Which was a lot of fun to read. I like teaching English as a second language and just reading like all these kids like broken English versions of Phantom Tollbooth was just like a very charming kind of experience.
Yeah, I love that. That's a good assignment because literally everything in this is allegory. Maybe that's what's so special about this is like every single thing in this is allegory. Like you could maybe say the same thing about Alice in Wonderland, right? You have characters that are just straight up wordplay, like the Cheshire Cat, like the Mad Hatter, the March Hare. But this whole thing is really just a poem. It's more like that than it is a book, really. It's about actually. I think I actually have a real problem with. I mean, I don't have a problem with people doing it, but like something like this, you cannot translate into film. Alice in Wonderland cannot be translated into film. They've done it, but it can't be done because it's not about the story. It's about how he's telling the story, the words themselves. And that's very much Phantom Tollbooth as well.
Yeah. Even if it's animated?
I think, it can be done, but you lose so much of, you lose all the poetry to it. Like the words themselves are a really important part of it, I guess.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
it'd be hard to get the joke about the weatherman, reading it.
I thought the kind of the same thing about Hitchhiker's Guide. Like, the movie does the more recent movie does a pretty good job, kind of capturing some of the feel. But a lot of that book, to me, or one of the reasons I always liked it and the sequels was just the way Douglas Adams writes. I mean, you can tell, he wrote for Monty Python. It's just that kind of sort of absurdist British turn of phrase.
Yeah. I think that like that with that movie, like it's one of those things, like if you've never read the book, I think that movie is fantastic because it gives you a taste of what the book is. But like if you're going in reverse and you're well acquainted with the source material, you feel how much is absent from it. And I feel like, Alex, that's maybe kind of what you're sort of saying with like Alice and Phantom Tollbooth as well, is that it's maybe not necessarily that you couldn't make something really enjoyable for people that, like, you know, especially if it is their entry point, would feel really special, but also just like you know, we're talking about, you know, a book that's very it just has a high density of ideas and the words that are presented, and so you would necessarily be sacrificing that when you turn into film, just because the amount of words actually communicated to the audience would be less.
Yeah, I guess really all I'm saying is it would be different.
Yeah.
That's kind of, yeah, no shit, Alex. There's a part here about reality and illusions. And,
yeah, I was hoping we'd get to that.
Yeah. Reality is a bunch of people with their noses to the ground. I was trying to find the exact quote. But reality is a bunch of people with their noses to the ground, and there's nothing there. They're just running around doing imaginary tasks, which you know, that actually reminds me of what you said about the trivium earlier. But
yeah,
like Milo asked him how this happened. They're like, you know, well, there used to be things here. There used to be things to see. But one guy figured out that you could get places faster by just staring at your feet, and then everyone started doing that. And then everything vanished because no one gave a shit. No one even noticed. And it's like, Milo says something beautiful about like, well, why don't they go live in illusions? It's a beautiful city. And he's like, well, a lot of people do. But it's just as bad to be living a lie than to fuck. I wish I could find that part actually. I need to find exactly what he said there.
I think it's maybe 118. If you
I got it.
Version.
Good job. Yeah, that was really accurate. It was fucking 116.
Okay.
It says, he says, how can you see something that isn't there? Yawned the humbug who wasn't fully awake yet. Sometimes it's much easier than seeing things that are here, or seeing things that are. For instance, if something is there, you can only see it with your eyes open. But if it isn't there, you can see it just as well with your eyes closed. That's why imaginary things are often easier to see than real ones. That's like, oh, that's actually not what I was looking for, but that's beautiful too, because that's counterintuitive. I had to read that a couple of times. That's counterintuitive to what one might think. It's like what I imagine is out of my reach because I can't see it. But it's like that's not actually the case. What you imagine is always with you. Like you can see that anytime you want to. And reality is actually much harder to look at, or literally harder to see. Oh, here we go. So someone's telling him, I can't remember who it is, but someone's telling him about how the city got that way. You know, everyone's staring at their feet. And Milo says, hasn't anyone told them? It doesn't do any good. Oh, it was Alec. That's who it was. For they can never see what they're in too much of a hurry to look for. Why don't they live in illusions? It's much prettier. Many of them do. But it's just as bad to live in a place where what you do see isn't there as it is to live in one where what you don't see is. And Milo says, perhaps someday you can have one city as easy to see as illusions and as hard to forget as reality. That will happen. That will happen, but only when you bring back rhyme and reason. And that's literally true in the story, you know, but that's also literally true.
Yeah. One of the things that I really grew to appreciate about that section is like, I think that it works very well in terms of like just the idea of like, you know, kind of problem avoidance and burying your head in, you know, like nice thoughts and you know, versus grappling with sometimes a cold reality. But like I also like the idea that I feel like is kind of implied there that like also like which is maybe more critical of the people in reality of the idea that if we constantly ignore the things that actually are positive in the world has less of an excuse to create more positive things. And like we have a tendency because of what we pay attention to somewhat democratically determine what actually is going to exist. And when we don't appreciate good things, they stop popping up as often. Like, you know, because I mean the people living in reality, like that is the actual real setting, you know, that you know would generally be considered more valid than illusions. And it has nothing good at that point. And I think that like especially, you know, I find myself like nowadays just with, I mean, like how easy it is to dwell on the negative, like, you know, and often for good reasons. I mean, we did just go through a pandemic and everything's awful, but like, you know, it's easy to just let that like overcome you and like not ever appreciate when something good is happening. And like, then it's not that surprising when you just never feel good ever. And I've whenever I read that section now, I find myself like kind of having to remind myself, like, man, I should maybe try to pay better attention to what things are still good if I want them to still exist. And you know, just which I mean can apply to a lot of things. I mean, you know, just like actually make time for friends and make sure that they still feel like your friends, and you know, just a lot of those little things like that. They're easy to let slide just because you're busy and tired all the time. And
Yeah.
That's very true, man. We get wrapped up and it's easy to do, and it's not anyone's fault because like that's just what life is. But if we don't make the effort, those things disappear. That's a very good point. Yeah, that I like you brought up friends. Like if you don't like there can be no ill feelings between two people and they just don't, like, you know, life gets in the way and people fade apart, and that's like that you could say like that they're no longer in your reality at that point because it just, and that, yeah, I think that's kind of to kind of add to that, that's a really important note also. Like it's not always necessarily like it's not malicious, like it's something we do on accident, but it's something we have to do, we have to take very seriously.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times people even, you know, when they're in that kind of reality sort of setting, I think a lot of times there's very good reasons to tell yourself like why you're doing that. Like, I mean, I know, and I know for me, like working in education, that's always been a thing. It's just like education will gladly take all of your time if you let it, and like let that be the only thing you focus on. It's just like it's important, it's got to get done. Nothing else in the world matters as long as you know are a resource to be spent up in the name of this cause. Like, and you know, you would never feel like a bad person for letting that happen. um you know, and a lot of people would praise you for it, but also your life would, there would be a lot of things disappearing from your life when you do that kind of thing. And I think that's true of a lot of other like professions in particular. I think like in the working world, which like I said, I mean, a lot of times when I read this book now, it's about like as an adult, like how does this impact like navigating a professional life? And I think that a lot of people struggle with that at this point of just, you know, kind of sacrificing way too much in the service of like what your role is supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah, it's really easy, it's really easy. And it's not like you said, it's not necessarily even like a bad thing, but like the world is detrimented by you not taking care of yourself. Like it's not selfish to take care of yourself because the world is negatively influenced when you don't. So if all you do is work all the time and don't stop to smell the roses, the flowers stop existing for everyone, not just you.
Yeah, and I mean, especially, I mean, you know, with musicians on the call, I mean, like, you know, that's something where like just like art is something that, I mean, that that is something that, generally you have to take time away from the, the big things to do, but also like there are people out there who are going to be glad that you did, and glad that, that's something they can appreciate and be entertained by.
Yeah.
Yeah. This discussion reminds me of something. I can't remember where I read this, but it was like Cal Newport or something like that, about that you are what you put your attention on, and that I mean that's kind of what makes a person up, is what they focus on and what they turn their mind towards. And that yeah, I mean, if you're not paying attention to something, got more cats in the if you're not paying attention to something, then it's almost like it's just going back to the book, it essentially ceases to exist for you and within you in a way.
Yeah.
So there's a similar quote to that. Has anybody read Kurt Vonnegut's Mother Night?
No.
No, that's a fantastic book. And the quote's actually not from the book; it's from his introduction that he wrote for it. But it goes, "We are what we pretend to be, so we ought to be very careful what we pretend."
Oh.
And I really love that line. It's a book about somebody who in Nazi Germany basically got approached to be like technically a spy for the US, but like basically like the Alex Jones of Nazi Germany. And like he was supposed to like embed like, like certain cues to communicate like coded information for the Allies. And but essentially like it's a book kind of asking this question of like, okay, great, you were a spy for the US. You were also excellent at being Nazi Alex Jones. Were you a good person?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like I mean, the damage that he did, and the amount that he gave, kind of this credibility to the cause, and caused those ideas to spread among people who maybe would have not been as on board otherwise. Like that's a real impact that he had, and so it's one thing to tell yourself like, oh, I'm not really one of those people, but 95% of the time he definitely was, and he was extremely good at it. And it's that book's really, really excellent, and also not super long if anybody ever has the time to set aside to it. I first heard of it because a band I'm really good friends with in Jackson called Euphonic. They did a play on that line for a song of theirs that goes like, "We are what we pretend to be, so why not pretend to be happy?" Which is also a good line. But
Yeah.
So what was the name of that book? I've heard that line, but I didn't know it came from that book.
yeah, it's
He's
Mother Night.
also
Mother
an
Night.
absurdist, right?
What's that?
Kurt Vonnegut, like he's also an absurdist writer, right?
Yeah, he is. He's very absurdist and like very satirical, and yeah, like I think writing style is not really like Phantom Tollbooth, but I think that there's like a common element on them that I think is easy to appreciate in both, of just like this very clever and fun and lighthearted way to make you think about some very uncomfortable topics at times. And almost like I don't know, kind of like a scriptural undercurrent of like, if you understand the book, you're also working towards maybe being a little bit better of a human being.
Yeah. I think yeah, the kind of the works we've been discussing share that theme, where it's like you're bettered by reading this. It's a mirror. Like I think, yeah, and I don't want to focus on it too much, but because I really could. I could talk about it for 2 hours. But like as you pointed out, scripture is pretty much the perfect example of that, where I mean a lot of religious texts, but the you it's more about you reading it than it is about what you're reading. It's like I mean that's actually part of that whole thing, is like you're possessed by the Holy Spirit, or different terminology. This is the living word of God. It's like, I meant to mention that earlier when we were talking about the chiastic storytelling. So it's written in a circle, and part of that belief is that you can trap a spirit inside, and it's a golem. So the living word of God, as Jesus describes the Old Testament, I kind of take him literally on that, where when you read that, okay, so like example, people talk about, I'll do it with this right now. You can flip open the Bible to any page and find something profound, and that applies to you right now. Same thing with tarot cards. It's divination. You can, it's like, oh wow, this applies to me so much. It's like, yeah, because that's how that works. And it's like, this is a book written by you, for you, about you. And what was I gonna say? I think there's a lot of truth to that with these kind of books too. And I don't know how literally I mean that, but this book is alive. It's like this this book is interacting with me. This is a conversation. And I'm sure you guys can relate to that, at least in a metaphorical sense. But yeah, there's something special about these kind of stories, and they all tend to follow the same formula. I noticed, where it starts where it ends. It's allegorical, and that's kind of what I was saying about. I don't think that's true of, say, and I love Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but I don't. That's really the same kind of thing. Tolkien's trying to show you a world. Norton Juster is trying to explain a concept, and it's like he is also showing you a world, but that's more that's more part of the journey than it is, like, that's not the point.
Yeah.
There's something different. I would consider this more like an Odyssey than a fantasy.
Well, also, like, to a point that you made, like, because of the wordplay, it does kind of seem like you're part of the story. Because, like, if you weren't reading it, then, like, the jokes wouldn't be made. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it gets you involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
The part where oh, here it is. I found it. There's that one when he goes to the place with the sound. What is her name? I'm trying to find it. After the awful den.
Yeah,
It's after Discord.
the sound keeper.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. What is her name? Did she have a name?
It's just the Soundkeeper.
Oh, it's just the Soundkeeper. Okay. Well, anyway, she she says, "Did you know that there are almost as many kinds of stillness as there are sounds? But sadly enough, no one pays any attention to them these days. Have you heard the wonderful silence just before the dawn? Or the quiet and calm just as a storm ends? Or perhaps you know the silence when you haven't the answer to a question you've been asked, or the hush of a country road at night, or the expectant pause in a room of people when someone is just about to speak, or most beautiful of all, the moment after the door closes and you're all alone in the house. Each one is different, you know, and all very beautiful if you listen carefully." That's, you know, there's silly stuff in this book that made me laugh, and then there's stuff that's just like made me tear up, and I'm like, that's fuck, man. This is the whole shebang, really.
Yeah. As you were reading that, I was just thinking about, like, you know, my wife and I have been trying to go for walks more after work now that, like, you know, it's staying light just a little bit longer. And like today we were walking, and like she looked up and like made the comment of like, there are stars. Like I can't remember the last time I saw stars. And like, you know, just, you know, you reading that just kind of made me think about like how, I mean, that should be a given to, like, you know, but also when she said it, it was like, oh yeah, I don't know either. Just don't look up. And, you know, most of the time I'm just, you know, in areas with high light pollution and everything. And like, you know, just some of those little things that can really feel worth noticing, like just are so easy to not pay any attention to.
Yeah. And the stars will go away if you don't go look at them. They're not there anymore because no one noticed them.
Yeah.
We were all looking at the city lights, and now the stars are gone. You can't find them.
I really love that image in this of and I this is one thing that came back, just remembering liking this when I was a kid, is that the bit where she hits the bass drum and then the cotton balls will roll out, and it's just a very visceral image of, you know, kind of like a synesthesia thing of making a sound physical. I just thought there's some really fun little things like that just, I don't know, really just capture a moment and stick in your mind. I remember that one from reading this as a kid.
I feel like where they eat the letters, like that's kind of the same theme, where like the more used letters taste better, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I could totally see that.
Yeah. Like the really common ones everyone wants to eat because they taste great. And then and then no, it's like, no one likes that one. It's bitter. Yeah. That's true. A lot of the word, you get some words that are popular flavors and ones that like no one ever uses. That's kind of actually back to the Soundkeeper. She's talking about she was gatekeeping sounds. She's like, no one can have sounds because you made awful sounds. It doesn't make me happy to hold back the sounds, for we listen to them carefully. It can tell us things far better than words. But if that is so, asked Milo, shouldn't you release them? Never. They just use them to make horrible sounds, which are ugly to see and worse to hear. But some sounds are good, or some noises are good sounds, aren't they? That may be true, but if they won't make the sounds that I like, they won't make any. He suddenly discovered the way he would carry his little sound from the fortress. He figured, I forgot about that part. But she's like trying to gatekeep the sounds, basically saying, if you're not going to make the sounds I like, you can't make any sounds, which is just censorship. That's just straight up censorship. It's like, no, you can't say that because I said so. And I'm the Soundkeeper. It's like, and until a point, like, and that's how it happened too, is like it became less and less until suddenly no one can say anything at all about anything, you know. There's a lot of I'm sure I'll read this again at some point and find like it'll be like reading it the first time again. And then right after that, the next part is conclusions. They're all driving in the car, and Humbug goes, it's a nice day, and talks like, it is a nice day. And I was like, yeah, it's a nice day. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Everything's going to be great from here on out. And as soon as he says that, he's ripped out of the car and transported to the island of conclusions. And then Canby's like, well, Milo's like, how did I get here? And he's like, well, you jumped for seemingly no reason. It's like, and then he's like, well, I'll just jump back. And he's like, that's not how conclusions works. You're going to have to work really hard to get back where you were. And then, he had to swim back to shore, and then he's like, man, I'm never jumping to conclusions again. I feel like that really that part itself could really sum up what Phantom Tollbooth is, where it's like, just the allegory to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know about other people's copies, but that's like the little like kind of preview excerpt in mine, like just on the very first page. So if you're trying to decide if you want to buy it, like that would be the first taste of the Phantom Tollbooth. So somebody agreed with you that was a good, just like kind of summing up of what the book is like. I
Yeah.
also really like in that part how like, all three of them swim back and like, and like Talk and Milo are just like drenched and like we're never doing that again. The humbug's just like completely dry and like fully prepared to keep jumping to conclusions as much as he wants and like never learn anything from it.
Because he got carried back. That went completely over my head.
Yeah.
That's because they carried him back. He didn't have to do shit.
Yeah, and so he never learned his lesson and is just gonna keep doing it.
Yeah. Oh, that's another reason I thought this book was British, is the humbug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um
Yeah, and how how everybody gets trapped there. It's almost like they can't abandon their conclusion that they jump to and keep waiting for it to come true and just sort of spirit them off the island.
yeah. Oh, and then at the end, maybe the best part, when he comes back. So yeah, it comes full circle because the way it starts out, which we really get into the B story now, where Milo. Oh yeah, that's actually the very first thing in the book. There was once a boy named Milo who didn't know what to do with himself, not just sometimes, but always. When he was in school, he longed to be out, and when he was out, he longed to be in. On the way, he thought about coming home, and coming home, he thought about going. Wherever he was, he wished he was somewhere else, and when he got there, he wondered why he'd even bothered. And then at the end of the book, after all of his adventure, he's talking about going back, which I guess I should read the letter. He tries to get back in at first, but the toll booth is gone. He sees a letter and it says, "Dear Milo, you have now completed your trip, courtesy of the Phantom Toll Booth. We trust that everything has been satisfactory and hope you understand why we had to come and collect it. You see, there are so many other boys and girls waiting to use it too. It's true that there are many lands you've still to visit, some of which are not even on the map, and wonderful things to see that no one has yet imagined. But we're quite sure that if you really want to, you'll find a way to reach them all by yourself." And then the signature is blurred out. I guess before I go any further, any thoughts about that? Who wrote that?
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I feel like maybe the best guess would just be the author.
Oh.
But because I don't feel like it's a character in the book.
Okay. Whoever provided him the toll booth, which isn't explicitly said anywhere in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I like that answer. It's Norton Juster himself. Yeah, because I mean, art, it's part of Milo's subconscious, and all of that happened in his head, but it didn't.
Yeah, it's kind of like the never-ending story. Like the book exists, but no one knows where it came from, and you essentially sort of write it yourself through your own imagination in a way.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I haven't thought about Neverending Story in a long time. I actually want to read that now. I've seen the movie, but I haven't read it.
I haven't read it either. I think it's a German book, actually.
We should do that one soon.
Yeah.
Oh, but at the end, it's so cool because he's he's not interested even when he tries to be. Which like kids get jaded and bored, and that's just, they get mopey coming of age. And then like Alice didn't want to go do whatever it was she had to do, and so she followed the rabbit instead. And then when she woke up, she was more mature, and she was like, I guess I'll go do whatever it was my mom asked me to. And that's, I guess that's another reason why this hits so close to home, is we've all been to Wonderland. and that's we we come in and out of it really. But
Yeah, one thing I really appreciate about the ending, especially like just over the years, is that like it is like a hero's quest kind of arc, but like I feel like a lot of times with hero's quest, like you run the risk of the character basically just like becoming stronger, more confident, and like they're just like by the end of the story they're they're just a more powerful, like just headstrong individual than they were before. Like a lot of times it's about like finding their voice and finding their own sense of self-worth and self-confidence. Like whereas Milo, like when you get to the celebrations at the end, like and all the parades and everything, like he seems like very uncertain of like, well, I made mistakes along the way, and we would have been here faster if I had known things better. And like, when the princess like tells him, they're cheering for you, and he like doesn't really feel like that's what should be happening and stuff. And I really appreciate that, like for all of the when you look at the message to kids of just basically like the pursuit of knowledge is not supposed to be a boring and dry thing, that like that's actually just the best thing about life, is that you get to find out more about it as you go along. Like I appreciate that it doesn't oversell it as like you're going to get the answers to these things and then you're going to be on top of the world and you're going to have it all figured out and you're going to just know that you're the expert. And like it's honestly one of the most honest books as far as like kind of hinting that like, hey, adults are kind of still feel like kids that just are arbitrarily adults at this point. That like you don't actually have that magical switch. You just know what you've been through and what you've experienced, and now you know a little bit more to keep working. But like you never get that like, oh, I'm the expert and I'm perfect kind of feeling, especially if you're approaching the pursuit of knowledge in a very earnest way, where suddenly you have, the more you learn about something, the more you realize you have questions about it. And just, I think like as far as, a book that like can really mean something to kids without necessarily lying to them about anything, I feel like this book does that really well.
yeah, on what you were just saying, at the very beginning, since no one bothered to explain otherwise, he regarded the process of seeking knowledge as the greatest waste of time of all. And that's, yeah, he didn't understand that that's the whole point, man. and then back to the end again. After he reads the letter, right after he reads the letter, Milo walked sadly to the window and squeezed himself into one corner of the large armchair. He felt very lonely and desolate as his thoughts turned far away. I'm going to skip a little bit. And yet, even as he thought of all these things, he had somehow noticed that the sky was a lovely shade of blue, and that one cloud had the shape of a sailing ship. The tips of the trees held pale young buds, and the leaves were a rich, deep green. Outside the window, there was so much to see and hear and touch. Walks to take, hills to climb, caterpillars to watch as they strolled through the garden. There were voices to hear and conversations to listen to and wonder, and the special smell of each day. And in the very room in which he sat, there were books that could take you anywhere, and things to invent and make and build and break, and all the puzzle and excitement of everything he didn't know, music to play, songs to sing, and worlds to imagine and then someday make real. His thoughts darted eagerly about as everything looked new and worth trying. Well, I would like to make another trip, he said, jumping to his feet, but I really don't know when I'll have the time. There's just so much to do right here. And it's, you mentioned that he isn't Mr. Strong, confident, attack the world. He's curious, and he's unsure of himself. When at the beginning, I would say he's actually kind of sure of himself, and that's his problem.
Which, I mean,
He's
I mean,
always
that's kind of the real life problem too, right? That like a lot of times people are very confident about the things that they're wrong about, and once you if you can break through that and start trying to learn more about things, you suddenly start to realize how complicated everything is. And it's, I mean, just some of the loudest and most headstrong people are wrong about a lot, because otherwise they wouldn't have that confidence, because they would know too much about it. Like,
that's exactly right. It's like I know old people that aren't like this, but it's like you meet older people and they like, it's like you have children and then you have like the in-betweens, and then when you get to your old age, it's like you start to become a child again. And it's like, man, I wasted so much time thinking I knew shit instead of just like listening and trying to learn. And yeah, like it's like I was talking to you were talking about like how it would affect you if you had a kid reading it again. I was talking to my friend who has a young kid the other day, and we were just talking about how much you can learn from a child. It's like, if you're listening, and it's like you can learn so much from everything if you just have your eyes open. Yep. There's so much we could say about this, but I'm gonna turn it over to you guys. Do you have any other thoughts about this? Closing?
No, it's fun to read it again.
Any favorite parts? Yeah.
I mean, I definitely.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I was just as final thoughts. I mean, like I said, this is a book that I do go back to just kind of constantly. That like, I mean, I don't know, for anybody who happens to like watch this who hasn't read the book. Like, I mean, the appeal of it is that like every page has like just tons and tons of things that you can like zero in on and like just get so much out of it. Like, I mean, it's just the density of it, while still like, it's very hard to find something that densely like clever and skillfully crafted that also is just like just really kind of delightful and fun. Like it's you would usually have to find something like way more like condescending and like abstract and like just very difficult to wade through to find that level of like craft and attention. So just like finding something that like honestly makes you feel good as you're reading something that you can invest as much or as little time as you wanted to, like that's such a rare reading experience. And I just like, I mean, I'm super grateful to have been introduced to it as young as I was, and to just have that just constantly. And it can sometimes be hard to convince people like, oh no, like even if you're in your 20s or 30s, like you really should go and read this children's book. But like, I mean, this is like my highest recommendation for just about anybody, and I think most people would really enjoy it and get a lot out of it, and see themselves in it, and like find ways that it speaks to them really well.
Yeah, it's for everyone, for sure. Yeah, and thank you again for pointing this out to me. Like you, as you mentioned, like this is something that you would recommend to everyone, and I would too. But like I really enjoyed this. It hit very close to home, and that's probably not a personal thing. That's probably just everyone who reads this book, because it's about all of us. Hiatt, Liz, do you guys any closing thoughts on this?
One thing I really enjoyed were the illustrations. Actually, for me, it made the book come alive. Sometimes with illustrations, it boxes you. It kind of closes off your imagination. But with this book, I felt the opposite. I feel like it kind of like brought the characters to life in a way. Maybe I just like books with pictures. Need more of that.
There's some that really add to it. Like, I mean, for example, that old the scary stories to tell in the dark. Like the whoever, I can't remember the name of the artist who did the illustrations for that, which are absolutely horrifying. But I mean, you can't really imagine that without the illustrations. This is kind of a similar thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah, I agree with you, Liz, that like it can actually detract from this kind of thing to have visuals in it. But the way Jules Pfeiffer did it is just like it adds so much to it. And it's really grungy, you know? Like some of the stuff is like it's almost kind of like hard to tell what's happening. But like that doesn't detract anything either. It's like I like that. Yeah. All the artwork was fantastic. Oh, actually, we were talking about Hitchhiker's Guide. That it kind of reminds me of Hitchhiker's Guide, the way the illustrations work in that too. And I don't feel like those detract from it either.
Yeah,
but, yeah, those just kind of help. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for coming tonight. John, does Resistance House Band have anything coming up you want to plug?
Yeah, we do have a show that's going to be in March. It is March 24th at the Cobra. It's our bassist Brian's birthday show, and lineup's super good for that. Euphonic that I mentioned earlier is coming out from Jackson to play that. We got a Dangerous Method and Felix Tandem are on that as well. So that's going to be a really good one. We're super excited about that.
Hell yeah, that's a sick bill. Happy early birthday, Brian, if you're watching this. Man, that'll be a great show. Show up, Alice. I'll know if you don't because I'll be there and I'll judge you. Hi, Liz. Does Cassette Stress have anything coming up you want to plug?
Yeah, so we're playing on Sunday, March 5th with Sleeper Signal and Scarlet Magnum at the East Room. And there it seems like it's the night of shows. We're also playing on March 24th at that the punk cover show. There are like 3 or 4 things playing that night that I would love to be at all of them, but we're also playing that.
Right on, Alice. Be at both places at the same time. I will, and I'll judge you if you don't. Oh yeah, and we're reading Watership Down next month.
Oh, cool. I've not read that.
Yes, I haven't either, but my friend recommended it to me, and I know it's about rabbits, so I feel like it's perfect. And it's also a children's book, so I think it'll be a good one. Obviously, you guys are all welcome to come back for that if you feel like it, but no pressure. And we'll see you next week, Alice.